All right, picture this. The grand historian himself, Sima Qian, is standing right in the middle of these muddy, waterlogged ruins. This place, it used to be one of the greatest, most vibrant metropolises in the entire world, and the locals are gathered around him telling this insane story of absolute destruction. They tell him they diverted the Yellow River. In 3 months, the walls collapsed, the king surrendered, and Wei was extinguished. I mean, wow, it is just an incredibly dramatic, truly cinematic end to one of history's great superpowers.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating ancient source text, Sima Qian's Historical Records on the State of Wei. Now, let's just dive right into this, because we're going to look at this ancient superpower, not just as a kingdom, but honestly, almost like a massive modern corporate empire. We are going to trace its epic 3-act tragedy. We're talking its gritty startup days, its ruthless market monopoly, and finally, its total, devastating bankruptcy.
So, Act 1, the startup. The origins of the Wei. You know, before they were this dominant superpower, the Wei clan were kind of just mid-level managers serving the state of Jin. But they had this founding prophecy given to an early ancestor, Bai Wan. Now, Wan translates to a full, complete number, often meaning 10,000. And Wei translates to a great, exalted name. So a diviner looked at this and basically promised massive demographic and political growth from the very start. It was literally the ancient version of a guaranteed unicorn valuation. The divination signaled they were destined for huge, exponential growth, gathering the masses under a great name. And man, did they deliver on that promise. They did it through what we can really only call the ultimate hostile takeover. The Wei clan, alongside 2 other subordinate families, Han and Zhou, orchestrated this massive, ruthless coup. They completely partitioned their parent state of Jin, literally dismantled the conglomerate from the inside out so they could become their own independent, highly agile sovereign powers. Which brings us to Act 2, the monopoly, the Golden Age. Under their leader, Wei Wunho, Wei transformed into the absolute dominant superpower, and they did it through hyper-aggressive talent acquisition. It brilliantly illustrates their intensely logical approach to leadership. Look at Minister Li Kei's 5 rules for judging a minister. I mean, look at how incredibly modern this feels. It's like a behavioral interview guide from over 2 millennia ago. When a candidate is idle, who do they associate with? When they're rich, who do they give their wealth to? When they're successful, who do they promote? And in hard times, when they're poor or destitute, do they maintain their ethics and boundaries? This was the rigorous, data-driven framework we used to build a world-class executive team. And the financial investment in that talent? Absolutely staggering. Minister Wei Chengzi reinvested a massive 90% of his enormous wealth directly into headhunting the era's best philosophers and strategists. He kept only 10% for his own household. When a rival minister complained about being passed over for a promotion, he was bluntly asked, "Hey, are you spending 90% of your income hiring geniuses for the state?" The answer, of course, was no. So the crucial takeaway here is that Wei's dominance was bought and paid for by relentless, self-sacrificing talent acquisition right at the very top. But every peak has a precipice. Act 3, the bankruptcy, the turning point and decline. So the turning point arrives with a new leader, King Hui, and a disastrous succession crisis that almost tanked the state overnight. Civil war erupts and former allies, Zhou and Han, invade and trap the new Wei king. But look at their conflicting corporate strategies here. Zhou wanted a hostile liquidation, just kill the king and divide the land. Han, on the other hand, wanted a softer approach, split the state in 2 to avoid a reputation for brutality. And because these 2 invaders couldn't agree on boardroom strategy, they got frustrated and literally just walked away. King Hui was saved purely by an accidental failure of his enemies to compromise. But the cracks in the empire? Yeah, they were glaringly obvious. Under King Hui's bad management, hubris completely took over. He stopped listening to the brilliant minds his predecessors hired and just started bleeding vital assets. At the Battle of Meiling against the state of Qi, they fell into a brilliant ambush. The crown prince was captured and their top general, Peng Zhuan, was killed. Then, out in the west against the rising power of Qin, Prince Ang was completely deceived by his former associate Shang Yang. The army was crushed, massive territory was lost, and things got so bad Wei actually had to abandon their ancestral lands and relocate their capital east to Diliang. And this brings us to a moment of deep, deep executive desperation. King Hui invites the famous philosopher Mencius to his court and delivers this painfully honest plea. He says, "My armies have been crushed. The state is empty. I am deeply ashamed. How can we profit our state?" He is scrambling for a quick fix, right? Some new profit strategy to save his legacy. But Mencius brutally shuts him down. He tells the king that if everyone from the top down is just scrambling for profit, the state is doomed. He urges him to focus on humanity and righteousness instead. But honestly, at this point, a culture change was probably way too little, too late.
Which leads right into the fight for survival.
Wei enters this desperate, bloody fight for survival against their most ruthless and efficient competitor yet, the state of Qin. The territorial bleed was rapid and it was devastating. Year 6, they hand over 400 li of prime land. Year 7, they lose a staggering 61 cities. Year 9, more strategic cities fall. By year 13, the Qin army has pushed all the way to the gates of the capital, Daliang itself. They are losing market share and territory at an unprecedented, catastrophic rate. I actually want to pause here for a second just to truly grasp the horrifying scale of warring states combat. 240,000. That is the number of Wei and Han coalition troops slaughtered in a single campaign by the Qin general Bai Qi at the Battle of Yik. The sheer loss of human capital was mind-boggling. It permanently crippled Wei's ability to mount any kind of defensive strategy. Yet, even in this crazy downward spiral, there were these flashes of incredible, defiant individual heroics. You have Tang Zhu, a diplomat who's over 90 years old, marching into the Qin court and successfully shaming the Qin king into sending reinforcements during a crisis. Later, the brilliant Wei royal, Lord Xinling, literally steals the military seal to save an allied state. He then manages to organize and lead a massive 5-state coalition to successfully rout the Qin army at Heiwei. So the crucial point here is that individuals still fought back with these brilliant high-stakes maneuvers. But structurally, it was basically like bailing water from a sinking ship,
Ultimately leading to the final collapse.
Despite those heroic flashes of individual brilliance, the foundation was entirely rotted out. In the 3rd year of King Zhao's reign, the Qin army arrives at Daliang for the final time. And they don't even bother with a traditional bloody siege. No, they engineer a massive infrastructure project to divert the waters of the Yellow River directly into the city. The capital is flooded, the Great Walls literally dissolve into mud, the king is captured, and the once mighty state of Wei is officially extinguished, reduced to a mere administrative commandery of the new Qin Empire. Which brings us full circle, right back to Sima Qian standing in those watery ruins. And this perfectly illustrates the fascinating philosophical debate at the heart of Sima Qian's text. You see, when Sima Qian spoke to the locals, they insisted Wei fell purely because of bad management, specifically because the later kings foolishly stopped utilizing the brilliant Lord Xinling. But Sima Qian? He strongly disagrees. He argues that Qin's rise was essentially heaven's mandate, this overwhelming, unstoppable macroeconomic trend of unification. Sima Qian writes that even if Wei had the most perfect, legendary executive hires in history, human strategy alone simply couldn't stop the inevitable tide of Qin. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to consider today. When a massive empire falls, whether it's an ancient kingdom or modern corporate titan, does history ultimately hinge on the brilliance and failures of individual leaders? Or is it driven by the unstoppable, overarching tides of the era? Based on the epic rise and fall of the House of Wei, ask yourself, can great leadership actually overcome destiny? I hope this explainer has given you the framework to explore that incredible question. Keep learning and keep asking the big questions.